Welcome to Daily Steps from One Extraordinary Marriage, where we outline simple steps that you can take to have the ultimate marriage adventure. I'm Tony DeLorenzo, your co-host, along with my beautiful wife, Elisa. In today's show, we answer the question, what can I do when it seems like everything I do is wrong?
Now, this question came from a husband, but it could have easily, or just as easily, come from a wife.
Yeah, and we love your question. So if you want your question answered, send an email to dailysteps@oneextraordinarymarriage.com and just put in the subject line, Daily Steps question.
Now, when this is happening in a marriage, when there's this sense that you can't do anything right or that everything that you do seems wrong, this very quickly becomes a cycle. That the two of you start to dance through where, in this case, the husband is like, I'm trying to do all these things, but I'm just getting all this feedback from my wife that I'm doing it wrong, right? And so I'm trying to do different things and I'm getting told that I'm doing it wrong. And this cycle is so common in marriages. It just is. I can't tell you how many folks I coach with that there's some variation of, I can't do anything right. Everything I do is wrong. And it can happen. It can happen at any point in time in the marriage. Maybe you're in a season where your kids are little and it just feels like you're juggling, 100 million balls in the air and none of them are staying in the air. Or maybe there's been a loss of a job. And so finances are tight and you're trying to figure out what do I do? And there are no jobs out there and you're just in this place of feeling defeated. Or maybe there's been some sort of trust that's been broken. And out of that pain, the statement is coming out, or the actions that, basically, this statement in action form, right? The hostility or the withdrawal is coming out. And this happens when there's been these hurts and resentments that have been allowed to fester. And just like when you have an infection that's been allowed to, fester and then just starts impacting everything around it, that's what happens with hurt and resentment.
Oh, wow. So good.
In a marriage,
yeah.
Right? You don't take care of it. And then you have this infection that's spreading and you keep trying to do what you think your spouse wants or what they've said they want, but it's just not being received. And that's the big struggle here, because it's not so much that you're doing things that are wrong or that you can't do anything right. That statement is a symptom of the disconnect in your marriage. So often we get so focused on, well, this is what he said, or this is what she said. And so that's what we focus on. And we don't ever take a look at the bigger picture to say, what's the dynamic in our marriage right now? If I'm being told that everything I do is wrong, where is this coming from? Right? This is where the two of you kind of have to go on a scavenger hunt or like an archaeological dig, because you can see one thing on the surface, but when you start digging deeper, the picture changes.
Yeah, more things come into view. More things get realized, more things get taken out and said, hey, this is where this all began, or maybe steps from that point. But you're doing that to get to the root of why every time you are doing something, your spouse is going, that's not right, or that's not the way it should be done, or you never know how to do this thing, or whatever it may be.
Well, case in point, I had a couple I was coaching with, and the husband was very much in this place of like, Elisa, I'm doing all of these things. I'm doing all these things, and I said, okay, let me process this with your wife. And so I had a separate coaching call with her. One of the things that he did he would bring her like her favorite cup of tea and her favorite breakfast every morning, and I'm like, okay, hello.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time I got breakfast in bed, and this is like a regular occurrence in your world. And so I asked her. I said, tell me why this isn't resonating with you. And as we started digging into this, there were past hurts and resentments that had been buried so deep, but it was like wearing concrete glasses. So she couldn't see what was happening in the present because the hurts hadn't been healed from the past.
It was that open sore.
Oh, total open sore. I mean, her, in using that analogy, her vision was so infected, she couldn't see anything. And so as we started working together on healing the hurt and creating, repairing and restoring the trust, then all of a sudden, these actions that her husband was doing, things that were wonderful, could be seen and appreciated instead of being in this place like, you just can't do anything right. Everything you do is wrong. And a complete shift in their dynamic. But what had to happen for them and what has to happen for the two of you is that you need to create a safe space for this communication to happen. Because there's stuff, there's yuck that's been buried for a long time.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't have that place, believe me, it's going to be really tough to uncover. You know, it's going to be really tough to go on that archaeological dig without an expert sort of showing you where you need to start looking.
Mm-hmm. And the fact of the matter is that it's not an easy process. Right? Because when you've got this dynamic, you know you're going into something that may not be pleasant, right? Because when that dynamic's in your marriage, you know that you've got to uncover what are the hurts, what are the resentments, what has been an unmet expectation that my spouse has been holding on to for this long. And it's going into this place and saying, you know what? I'm willing to go, no matter how dirty it gets, no matter how messy it gets. I'm willing to go there to intentionally break this cycle. It's a conscious decision, guys. When you're hearing these phrases in your marriage, you've got to make the decision to consciously and intentionally break the cycle, because it doesn't just happen. If it could just happen on its own, if there was just like poof, you know, you listen to this podcast and poof, you know, magic comes out of your speakers and you're like, oh, all better. Well, then everybody would be doing it. You would have already fixed this. That hasn't happened yet in your marriage. So you've got to move into this place where the two of you, or maybe even one of you right now, makes a decision to get help. You've tried to do this by yourselves. You've tried to push through. You've tried to do all the right things. It's looking at the fact that if your car was making a funny noise, or if you had that infection that we were talking about, you wouldn't just, you know, keep waiting. You would go into the doctor. You would go to the mechanic and say, hey, this is making a funny noise. I don't know what's wrong. The same thing. Your marriage is making a funny noise right now.
Yeah.
It's time to go get help to solve what that noise is and get to the root of the problem.
For more help in this area of your marriage, check out oneextraordinarymarriage.com/coaching.